Hello, I'm Marc Scorca, President of Opera America. It's an honor and a pleasure to dedicate one of our onstage programs to the composer Daniel Catán. Before his passing in 2011, he contributed some of the most important and successful works to the American opera repertoire of recent years. Rappaccini's Daughter, Florencia en el Amazonas, Sal si puedes, and Il Postino. We're going to begin with a video tribute to Daniel, created by Andrea Puente-Catán.
Who carefully reviews Daniel Catán's musical career will be able to see something that distinguishes him among composers of his generation. When many of his colleagues were entering the intricacies of the avant-garde, he only seemed interested in gathering the conceptual and aesthetic elements that would allow him to achieve a very clear objective: the construction of works in the Spanish language. This would essentially become his creative ideology throughout his life.
I think it's a work of extraordinary depth and beauty. That is the most relevant thing that a work can be. That means that this is work that's relevant forever. And for me, that really symbolizes Daniel. He was a person who, on the surface of the water, let's say, was very, very genial and sweet and kind and such a ray of light. But underneath all of that was this complexity and depth, and that will always be Daniel in my memory.
The imagery, I have to emphasize the magical realism. It is part of the Latino culture. It is something that we grow up with.
Drama and the music together and the sense of economy and the unapologetic operatic fiber of it. You know, this is an opera with arias, duets, trios, and quartets.
He's John Doe.
It's John.
It's obvious that he's
No,
John
it
Doe.
says there's no time to lose. You are the hope of the world. All of this. Awake, awake.
Yeah, that's him.
That's his own voice talking to all of us.
Special thanks to Andrea for being the spirit behind this remembrance of Daniel. Andrea, you have been a most gracious and effective advocate for his work over the last 10 years since his very untimely passing. Daniel was a keynote speaker at Opera America's 2010 annual conference in Los Angeles. He spoke eloquently about the importance of second and subsequent productions of works that have already premiered. He also advocated for more collaboration among companies, so productions have an opportunity to move across the country to be seen in different theaters, sung by different singers, performed in front of different audiences and music critics. He wished that companies had greater flexibility in their schedules so that successful new works could be picked up by companies soon after their premieres, rather than having to wait years for an opening in their schedules. These continue to be goals for the field, but Daniel expressed these points more eloquently than I can. Also with us today are Susan Fader, the program officer at the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, but standing in today as a good and long-standing friend of Daniel's. Conductor Eduardo Diazmuñoz, whose early advocacy for Daniel's work led to the production of Rappaccini's Daughter at San Diego Opera in 1994, which he conducted. We have David Lomelí, the newly appointed Chief Artistic Officer at the Santa Fe Opera, who knew Daniel as a young artist at Los Angeles Opera. And finally, we have Andrea Puente-Catán, who is, again, the energy behind this wonderful tribute. Andrea, thank you. I'm going to start with Susan because among the guests today, you knew Daniel the longest. Where and how did you meet him?
Daniel was a graduate student in composition at Princeton when I was an undergraduate. And truth be told, I probably played some of his graduate student compositions because I was an active violinist and doing that as part of my undergraduate work. But I cannot tell you with any secure memory what I was hearing or playing at that time.
Well, I was going to ask you if you first met him as a composer, because his background, he's such a polymath, he studied so many things that it is entirely possible you could have met him in a literature course or a philosophy course, but you got to know him as a composer.
As a composer, he was a student of Milton Babbitt, which is wonderful to consider when you think about Daniel's long lyric lines and Milton's strict adherence to serialism, that the two of them could have connected that way. But next, I encountered him in the mid-1990s when I was at G. Schirmer, music publisher, and I got a call from Sue Nussin, then at the LA Philharmonic, saying that Daniel Catán was looking for a new music publisher, and she thought this would be a good match. And I think at that point, I listened to Florencia and Hija de Rappaccini and needed no more persuasion that this was something that was important for Schirmer to do. And that Daniel was a gorgeous composer and wonderful person and had something very significant to say, particularly for Spanish language opera in this country, which has been very underdeveloped at that time.
And still is, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And given your incredible experience, both as a publisher and as a funder of new work, how would you describe Daniel's style?
Oh gosh. I think Daniel was true to himself at every point, and that he took advantage of the beauty of the Spanish language, which, like Italian, has wonderful vowels and opportunity for long line and lushness. And he composed to his passions. He also had a sense of humor. And I think about "Si puedes" as a Spanish language "Così fan tutte" that is overdue for. Andrea's smiling at that description. Overdue for reconsideration. But I think about his long lines. I think about his lush orchestrations, about his mastery at writing for the voice, and just how beautiful it was to be in the midst of all this beauty.
Eduardo, Maestro, what did you first hear in Daniel's music that made you pay attention and want to advance his career?
Oh, wow, Mark. Well, first of all, greetings to all. A pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be part of this. The first thing that attracted me to Daniel's music was precisely just its lush sound. The first piece I've ever heard was El Árbol de la Vida, The Tree of Life, a symphonic poem that I heard in the 80s, 84, 85, and I just was captivated by it. And I told him so because we met like a decade before when he arrived from the United Kingdom to the National Conservatory of Music in Mexico City, where I was a student, and he came in to direct and to teach in the composition and investigation, research and composition lab with Mario Lavista. And, we both just made click instantly. So when I heard El Árbol de la Vida, it was just fascinating that I know this guy. And I had this instant communication with him. So yeah, that was the first thing that attracted me to his marvelous and incommensurable world.
Yeah, and what I find so interesting about his work is that even though it is, unmistakably contemporary music, it nonetheless feels rooted in the musical traditions of opera. Mm-hmm. It feels both new and firmly rooted. Would you agree with that?
100%, because like Susan just said about Spanish, he was just delighted in the sound of Spanish itself. At one point in probably it was like, I think 2002 or 2003, I said to him, Daniel, I just came to the following conclusion. You are to the Spanish language what Mozart was to German and what Britain was to English. And he just started to laugh and his giggle, his perennial giggle, you all remember that. And he didn't believe me. And I said, Daniel, I'm not teasing you, because we became friends after, more than 3 decades of being together. And I said, no, this is real. This is my heart feeling and my serious thought about you and how I regard you in history. You are that important. And he never believed me.
Susan, I saw you nodding in agreement with that sense of the music being completely contemporary and yet rooted. How do you respond to that?
Oh, absolutely. And an audience that wants to listen to Puccini would be in love with Daniel Catán's operas. They wanted to, but they do not sound retro. I agree that there's a contemporary sound to them and an understanding of operatic form, but a very individual voice nonetheless.
Yeah. Singers, I'm told, really like to sing his work. Yes. And I'm going to start with Eduardo, but then I'm going to move on to David. Eduardo, what is it about his music that you find that singers like?
It's so well written. It's so idiomatic. He knew the human voice and every texture so well. Unbelievable. We usually have long discussions about how Verdi wrote for the voice, or Richard Strauss, or Puccini. He also never believed me when I told him, to me, there are 2 composers that are emotional terrorists. One is Puccini and the other one is Daniel Catán. Because of the way you treat emotions through the human voice. And that has to do with a vast and profound knowledge of the human voice in every register, for a soprano coloratura to a basso profondo. I mean, he really knew how to write eloquently and gracefully for the voice.
Well, let me turn to someone who has sung the music, a former singer himself. David, what did you enjoy singing the music when you were working on Il Postino?
Yes. Working with Daniel was one of the most transformative experiences in my career for several reasons. It was, yes, Daniel knew the human voice, but was always a great collaborator in getting to know your voice and the feedback that you were giving to him. I remember that there was a certain part in the score of Postino when it was being written that he had 3 pages on the tenor part that I needed to have, basically singing on an F and then F sharp and then G and F and F sharp and G. And I said, for me at my 26 years old at that time. Like I would prefer to sing a little higher than this. But the score was going to be sung for Rolando Villazón originally at the time. So I said, I think for him, for what I feel is exactly the money, but I'm going to get personally fatigued on that. And we negotiated very, very, very good compromises on optional things that we did, and eventually became really, really easy to sing it, you know. But most importantly, I think that what it really made Daniel incredible is that every time that you felt as a singer that you were singing with him, even if you had a quiet orchestration or something beneath you, around you, I always felt involved with Daniel. You know, like he made exactly as some of the greater novelism. I always felt like when I was singing something from Daniel, or when I was experiencing music from Daniel, I felt like I was reading an incredible Latin American book of magical realism that would make something like so banal, like some little kids, some little emotion, something so human, a bombastic smashing like palette of colors. So when you were singing, you felt always like embraced emotionally and musically. You know, that was very bizarre, because he would also bring certain words that were so natural in the human emotions to say it with certain emphases. That's when he would create the accent, or that's where the climax will come. So it was not only like the human voice, but it was the natural born genius of Daniel to make emotion, making and matching the exact moment that he wanted to make you sing in a different way. So for me, that was the magic of working with Daniel in that time.
Wow, what a wonderful description of it. How fabulous.
Can I just also add a moment about his humility and his generosity toward other people, and just a wonderful spirit that, you know, really lit up a room whenever he was in it.
Mm. I know. I listened to you, and I of course knew him through our annual conference. I wish I knew him better. It's just incredible to hear about him. Andrea, you met him as a harpist. How did that? What were you doing, and what music were you playing?
I met Daniel, yeah, long time ago. I was 17 years old, and I was going to some contemporary music concerts. I was a harpist. Yeah, I played the harp, and I was very interested in playing contemporary music in those years. So there were these concerts in Mexico City, where chamber music concerts, and that's where I met Daniel. And I remember when he came in, and he had this cape, black cape. Remember, Eduardo? Long hair, a ponytail, and a black cape like Dracula, you know? So it was just like, who is this composer? Anyway, so that's how I met him. And then throughout all the years of music making under Eduardo or under other conductors in different orchestras, we saw each other a lot. So, well, that's...
Now, do you hear your harpist background in his music from the time after he met you?
No, yeah, I mean, he had a relationship with the harp. I can say that, like, for example, in Florencia, every time the harp comes in, you know, every time there's an arpeggio, it's like the love element, you know, and before, you know, Florence is thinking about Cristobal, and then there's this harp like, and you know that we're going that way. He uses the harp a lot. It's an instrument that he loved.
Well, you know, and you played it. You know, what was Daniel like when he was working on an opera? Did he isolate himself like Verdi, or did he compose like Bizet with lots of noise and traffic around him?
No, well, first of all, there was a year of research, or 2 years of research, and those were obsessive years of finding a libretto or finding a story. So, for example, I'm going to talk about, let's say, Sal Si Puedes or Il Postino. With Sal Si Puedes, he would study salsa music, like study and dance it, and take djembe lessons to write an aria for a crazy general. But his style of his everyday way of composing, first he researched, then he would start developing the characters, the harmonies of the characters. Then he would do the piano vocal score. And at the end, the cherry on the pie was the orchestration, which was a pleasure for him. But very methodical. He was very, very methodical, very disciplined. And every morning before breakfast, almost before coffee, he would jump into composing.
Wow. Now, for Il Postino, he wrote the libretto himself. Had he become frustrated by librettists, he said, enough, I'm going to write the libretto myself.
Yes, he did. It's such a difficult relationship. And sometimes he was about to lose his mind because he needed a quartet, a set of lines. And he was like, but he hasn't called me, and what am I gonna do? I have to write it. And so he started, I think from Florencia on, he started to write a little bit, and then more and more and more, more in Sal Si Puedes, more in Il Postino, and definitely in John Doe.
Mm-hmm. You and I chatted a few minutes ago about how we should think of Daniel. Mexican born with Russian background, with education in England and the US, and then living for an extended time in Asia. Is he actually just a global artist? How do you think of him as an artist?
That's a difficult question because everybody asks this question. So I would say he was a composer with Latin American roots, but he was a global composer. Not only because he was nurtured by, vast music, not only from Europe, but from Latin America and from Asia. That he was there for 2 years and he was studying, music from Japan, and that was reflected in the score of Rappaccini, in the shakuhachis, in the flutes, and so on. But also his love for literature that is also global. So I would say that he's a global composer. He was American as well, so
Mm-hmm. Just the scope of his learning and of where he lived, and his ability to absorb all of those influences, really remarkable. Mm-hmm. Now, Andrea, part of your job at San Diego Opera is the director of Hispanic Affairs, and you are deeply immersed in building cultural bridges.
Yeah.
How important is it to have new opera composed and performed in Spanish?
Well, I think it's vital. I gave a lecture in Ópera Latinoamérica about this, and I said, so what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for what? Are we waiting for Godot? What are we waiting for? We have a responsibility. I think Spanish, first of all, you are seated like in a mountain, a golden mountain of works in Spanish, incredible authors. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the language itself, the open vocals leads to compose well for the voice. And then we have a pool of singers. We are musical groups, a musical continent, I would say now. So I think it also can serve as a bridge between like North America and South America, Latin America. Mm-hmm. So I think it's crucial. And at the moment, what I see, and it's the work that North American opera houses are doing in projecting opera in Spanish is very big. I think this is where it's going to happen in the United States of America.
And David is a singer. And as a singer whose mother tongue is Spanish, what is it like to sing an opera in Spanish for you?
Oh, it's so much easier, for me. Suddenly, like, you get away with certain things in the technique that you have to be so methodical in other languages, and here, just because of the way that is written, you get away with something. And I have talked this with other performers of his music, inclusive of Maestro Domingo, that suddenly when he sings in Spanish or like in Postino, like, you start being able to sing higher just because the way that the voice like makes you to pronounce the sound in a way. So it's very beautiful to sing in Spanish. I would love to have more operas of the level of quality of Daniel out in the repertoire all the time. You know, it's really beautiful for the voice.
And Susan, I think you would agree that with all the new work activity going on and the diversity of this nation, it would be so wonderful if we saw more Spanish language opera.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We know that San Diego Opera is credited with giving Daniel his first production here in the United States in 1994. But I think we also have to give credit to David Gopley and Houston Grand Opera for the commissions that Houston Grand Opera gave. Susan, you were mentioning David and Houston Grand Opera and the importance there. Could you explain a little more?
Yes, well, of course, David had an unparalleled track record for identifying talent and nurturing talent. So not only did he give the premiere of Florencia de los Amazones at Houston, he then went on to commission Salsipuedes. So the opportunity for an opera conductor to have a second production at a company and get to know the company as well as the opportunity to hear this, I think was just profound.
And I think Daniel would have been, you know, really happy that it was a co-production, a new work co-commission with the Los Angeles Opera and Houston Grand Opera at the time. Eduardo, I saw you wanting to add something to this.
Yes, we always believed, Danielle and I, when we did the world premiere of Rappaccini's Daughter in April 1991, that was for us the first step on a long step, but aiming towards the United States. And San Diego Opera, with Ian Campbell, who was then the director, he said, okay, we'll produce it. So I believe that thanks to that production was that precisely Houston, Grand Opera, LA, Seattle, etc., looked at Daniel's work, and that's where Florencia was commissioned. And it was so successful that then Salsipuedes, as it's been said, followed that. But
I would like to add something. So saying all of this, I think that's why he does his last opera in English as an homage to the United States of America, choosing a Frank Capra subject, a movie. And this is kind of like his way of giving back.
Yeah, his way of being thankful to the country that offered him such great opportunities, because paradoxically, he's known for the composer of operas in Spanish, yet his last opera is in English. So that's very meaningful, very meaningful.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that at the time of the premiere of Il Postino, I was in LA and we were chatting, and as exciting as it was to have a premiere, he was equally excited that Cincinnati Opera was going to revive Florencia the following season, and this was just as important to him as the new work. And of course, Cincinnati, having done Florencia, then went on to do the workshop for Meet John Doe, which I believe is where the video excerpts come from, Andrea. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, correct. And, you know, with help of Eduardo Diazmuñoz and other two composers, and it's complete now. And there we go. We have an opera.
Well, friends, we could go on talking about each opera in great detail, but our time is up for today. I want to thank you all for these moments of remembering Daniel and his work. Andrea, thank you for being the inspiration for this tribute to him. And we will look forward to paying tribute to him with many more productions by many more companies of the operas that he has given us. So thank you one and all, and we'll be in touch soon. And now we have another musical treat. We have 4 performance videos of wonderful artists singing some of the most important excerpts from Daniel's work.
Eso es lo que ella sueña, la atmósfera de su alma, el laberinto que la cerca. Beatriz, Beatriz, ¿dónde está tú misma? Perfume delicioso y poderoso, avanza y retrocede, aparece y desaparece, penetra hasta el fondo de los pulmones y se disuelve la sangre. La sangre, la sangre. Beatriz, Beatriz, ¿dónde estás? Beatriz, Beatriz. Aquí tu enciende en tu lucero en mis ojos. Mírame, dame un rostro verdadero. Antier usted nos dijo que ayer usted nos dijo que hoy, ahora usted nos dice que pronto se burla de nosotros, ¿o qué, capitán? Solo acérquenos, desembarcamos y ya, en nombre del amor, en nuestra luna de miel, qué mala cara los tratan mal, que mejor que el mar abierto para componer un son. Antier usted nos dijo que ayer usted nos dijo que hoy, tan solo que nos dice que no se burla de nosotros, de capitán. Antier usted nos dijo que hoy, en nombre del amor, justamente por amor es que estamos aquí, pero amor a la patria. La patria no me arrancará el pellejo si no vuelvo, y mi esposa sí. La patria no morirá de tristeza, y mi esposa sí. Volver es imposible sin antes cumplir la misión. ¿Qué misión? ¿Martirizar a dos músicos? No hay martirio en el mar es todo lo que el hombre desea, vida, muerte, la libertad, la música, el gran puente entre el ser y su Dios y su demonio. Una mujer se yergue en cada ola, nos abre los brazos en el viento. Quien contempla de noche el firmamento, mira al mar desde el fondo. De una gota. No deserten el mar amigo, refleja los sueños, acérquense a él, y alguna noche se verán reflejados en su abismo. Que la mar es la nave más hermosa, un ritmo y es un cuerpo, es más bien la única costa, no es la ausencia sino el puerto. Tan solo sé que ayer nos dijo que no será mal. Acérquense a él. Es una burla, martirio, es un martirio, una burla, es una por piedad regresen los que es la nave más hermosa, es sí mismo y una burro, es más bien la única costa, no es la ausencia sino el puerto. Ayer usted nos dijo que ayer, ayer usted nos dijo que hoy es más bien
muchachas saben si en el puerto hay una fragata llamada el Invencible. Que si lo sabemos, la del Capitán Magallanes. Y allá vamos dos delfines, nos esperan a bordo. ¿Cómo dices? ¿Qué dices? Dijiste dos delfines. Lo que oyen parece un sueño, y los sueños no mienten. Dos delfines nos esperan, dos delfines nos esperan. Invencibles,
Hello, Opera America. My name is Cecilia Violetta López, and along with my wonderful pianist and dear friend, Nathan Salazar, we will be performing Romanza from Maestro Catán's Il Postino.
tengo la certeza que la semilla que entregáramos a la conciencia digna de miles y miles de chilenos no podrá ser cegada definitivamente. Tienen la fuerza, podrán avasallarnos.
Chile, la sangre de tus hijos nuevamente derramara. Hay tantos, tantos, tantos muertos, amarrados, heridos, mordidos, enterrados. Dime tierra, dime mar. ¿Cuánta sangre habrá de correr? ¿Cuántas lágrimas habrá que llorar? Yo veo solo a veces ataúdes a vela zarpar con difuntos pálidos y mujeres de trenzas muertas y tumbas llenas de huesos sin sonido, como ladrido sin perro. Chile, estoy lejos de ti, amor mío. Quiero llorar como los ríos y oscurecer en tu noche mineral. Me amarraré a tu proa de embarcación terrestre y así navegaremos confundidos hasta que tú me cubras. Hasta que tú me cubras eternamente.
Puse la frente entre las olas profundas, descendí como gota entre la paz sulfúrica, y como un ciego regresé al jazmín de la gastada primavera humana.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for celebrating this composer, Daniel Catán, a composer that dedicated his entire life to write opera. Thank you for celebrating with us.
So he writes me a letter, and I dig him up. He pours out his soul.